I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, the last 7 days or so will be a week that I won't soon forget. I'd like to give you just a quick trip through some of the things that happened that I think are just important and kind of noteworthy. So you've been looking here at a satellite image from Sunday, February the 5th. And what I want you to see here is this is Chile and Argentina. So we have a large drought that's going on here. And on the other side here in Chile, there's also incredibly hot and dry conditions. And what you see right in through here is some of the smoke from the fires that have basically happened this past 3 to 4 days south of Santiago. And some of that smoke made it all the way out here into the cloud field that's just off the coast. And you can still see the just very smoke-filled and dirty air. If I take you back a day before and then a day before that, February 3rd, I mean, again, we can just see the extent of this particular event. Very, very kind of tragic, the size and scope of the fires that have happened down here, again, south of Santiago, which you can see right here on this high-resolution satellite data. Now, the second thing, of course, this filled the news for the last several days here was the balloon that, of course, I guess we're learning more and more about from China. And this is kind of just the moment that it was shot down. I believe it was over South Carolina. It was shot down. I kind of tuned out of the news this weekend and was just kind of keeping up with this sporadically. But I found it quite meteorologically interesting to actually study this particular case, because you do notice that every single picture you saw of the balloon was in bright blue, clear skies. And I found it interesting that the timing of that balloon as it advanced across the United States from Montana all the way to South Carolina did so under high pressure. So clear skies, you could see it very easily, and it could very easily, if it had remote sensing equipment on it, see the ground. What I did find interesting is you probably saw a lot of these images in the news. And what was happening was a lot of folks were using a model that NOAA developed called High Split. I use it all the time, and I've shown it to you guys a lot in the past. It allows you to compute both forward and backward trajectories on where the wind is going to go. And I was really interested in this on Friday night, so when it was over Missouri. And so what I did was I actually put together a back trajectory of where the winds were at about the balloon's altitude, following it back over 10 days. And you can see that, of course, the winds, some of them did originate in China, came across the Pacific Ocean, then rose up into a ridge. See the flow going into a ridge here into British Columbia, then came through Montana toward Missouri. And actually, this is one of the reasons why the skies were clear, such that we could see it. Whenever you have flow coming over a ridge into a trough, well, the clouds are always where the trough exits, not where it enters. So this is one of the things that promoted very high pressure and actually quite mild conditions for this time of year, because some of this air was born on the Pacific, very mild coming through here. But you also probably heard about the brutally cold air that was going into New England. And on that same Friday, if you were to trace the winds over New York, they came in like this. So they started off over the North Pole. So if Santa would have put up a balloon, it would have come and spun around the Hudson Bay and then eventually made it into upstate New York, where where the daytime temperatures were struggling to get up to 0 Fahrenheit. And I'd like to take you to my Twitter feed for just a moment here, because I want to show you a video. This one here, this was just posted by Peter, but this is public data here, showing you what it looked like as nearly 120 mile an hour gusts at times hit the Mount Washington Observatory. So this, of course, is in New England, and this isn't some apocalyptic view. This is just what it looks like. The neat thing about this was the coldness in the atmosphere was such that how compact the atmosphere became resulted in the stratosphere. All right, that's the layer above us, coming down to the top of this mountain. So this is actually what it looks like to be in the stratosphere. It's amazing to see this. People work there. I don't know if you knew that, but people work inside this building. Just incredible to think of the minus 105 wind chills that were experienced there. And then here was the other big event. Last week we saw an historic ice storm that hit Texas and Oklahoma and Arkansas, parts of Missouri, northern Mississippi, and hit Tennessee and Kentucky as well. And some places picked up over an inch of ice. And we've had 2 events, this being the second since the start of this year, where the damage from those events is going to result in at least $1 billion in insured losses. The first was the flooding in California. The second was this event right here that you saw last week. Now, some of that precipitation did make it to us. And as we look at what's made it to North Carolina, I want to kind of reflect on maybe our overall drought situation across North Carolina and South Carolina, but also around the rest of the country. So since the start of this year, just kind of an arbitrary date to start things from, We now see that our easternmost climate reporting districts, which had been showing up very dry because of some recent precipitation, have now shown up somewhere close to average in terms of how much precip has been received since the start of the year. We still have a very wet corridor in through here, although a lot of this is in snowpack. This whole route is all in snowpack here. And the precipitation that came through Texas, although it was ice, did help recover some of the major losses this area had in terms of moisture, going all the way back, of course, through last summer into fall. But the drought here is not over by any stretch from this recent precipitation, and it's also redeveloping Montana, getting into North and South Dakota. We just need to keep an eye on all of these things. We also need to watch the National Drought Monitor map. There's a couple of important things I want to discuss on this. First of all, we've seen significant reduction in drought in the West. We've seen the drought stay nearly just put in the central plains of the United States, especially here in Kansas, parts of Oklahoma. We have seen improvement in the drought situation due to big snowpack on this very important river right here. This is the Colorado River. And so right now the river has about 135% of its normal snowpack on it. And lastly, here, we've now seen some reduction in the drought area in the Carolinas and the coastal regions because of this. But I want to talk about an underlying issue that I've been covering for the last few weeks that I think is important for you all to keep in mind. And that is when you go down to about 40 inches, 100 centimeters, we continue to see that last fall's drought on the Mississippi Basin, which includes the Mississippi, the Missouri, all of its tributaries, the Ohio, this entire drainage area still has very dry soils about 40 inches down. So there's been some top soil moisture recovery, but it has not yet cured some longstanding drought issues here. Meanwhile, we have been extremely wet across the lower Mississippi River Valley, and the soil moisture values across most of the state of North Carolina are now kind of on the high end of this distribution. So this is a place where drought has been shrinking, and that's going to be important to look at as we kind of watch where this precipitation pattern is going to go into the near future here. So I was recording this late on Sunday night, so the sun had set. We were watching a complex of storms just off the coast. You can see behind it, by the way, if I just take you back through Sunday, all the snow that is in place here. Whoops, got a brand new image there. And you notice that there is a complex deeper low pressure center right here that might bring some scattered storms and showers to coastal regions of North Carolina. But the model runs, as you see here, this was the NAM model. Keep most of that offshore. So if something's coming through, it came through last night on Sunday night right into this area. Now throughout the rest of the early part of this week, Monday, so what we're going through here, into Monday night and Tuesday, we're under the protection of high pressure. We're going to have mild conditions in here. And there's a front that's attached to this low that's way up here in Hudson Bay that's going to try to pull a front toward the Appalachian Mountains eventually, but doesn't quite get there. So overall, we're going to make it through the beginning of this week relatively dry overall. Now, what's really going to be important for us to watch in the coming days and weeks is what we've been watching since the big precipitation event in California ended. Because since then, the jet stream has built up into a large ridge here. It's favored deeper troughs that have come into like the Four Corner states and then ejected and have to run over this ridge. And this subtropical ridge, which has sometimes been closer to Bermuda, sometimes it's been in the Gulf of Mexico, sometimes it's been over Cuba. This has been a mainstay of the pattern and something that most long-range models do not want to shake. And I'd like to show what I'm talking about here. Because this pattern is going to be active. Remember, when I say that there's an active pattern, we're seeing a lot of these troughs of low pressure sweep through. They lift the air, creating better chances for precipitation. I'm going to play this fast, though, because I want you to watch. You just keep eye right in through here, okay? As we play forward, there's that trough, the system going off on Monday into Tuesday. We see another one digging into Texas there by Wednesday, Thursday, and it runs up. But do you notice during this time period, we just continue to see some sort of a feature like this, such that these troughs, they may dive down, but then they exit quickly and run up over this subtropical ridge. So I'm all the way out to this Friday the 10th, and that one tries to dig through and displace it, but it's really not fully connected to cold air, so it just scampers on out, and then the next one comes in here, and again, see the rebuilding of the ridge in this area? It just seems to be a permanent feature through the middle of this month, maybe even late throughout this month, that these troughs are likely going to be doing more of something like this with maybe one or two that skirts through. So you're saying, what's the point of all of that? That is the major boulder in the flow of the atmosphere. And it seems to be redirecting a lot of these storm systems. And it is having a pretty significant impact on our temperature pattern. So if you look over the next 10 days, very mild air. because we're limiting the ability for big ridges to build into Alaska, big ridge to build into Greenland, to get a deep trough that can sink into this area and displace that subtropical ridge I've been spending so much time talking about. So there's a lot of mild air across North America going through the front half of this month of February. Now, over the next 7 days, the models are in a bit of a battle in North Carolina. You notice this little stripe in through here, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. That is where the GFS, that's the U.S. flagship model, is wetter than the European. The European being wetter would be these colors. The GFS would be these. So what I like to do is to show you why there's a difference in our models. So what we're going to look at is a comparison, the GFS on the left and the European on the right. Now, we've already seen through Monday into Tuesday. Remember, there's the front that's coming toward us. There it is in the GFS. Here it is in the Euro. Notice they almost look in lockstep. But as we go from Wednesday forward, this is where the next low curls through my home state of Illinois. Now, what's interesting is the models made a huge flip compared to last week. Earlier, the European was fast, moving the system through. Now the GFS is faster. And that's part of the reason why we're going to watch later this week, right in through here. See that? So I'm going to take you from Thursday through Friday. Look at both models, Thursday through Friday. The GFS is putting this extra surge of moisture along this frontal boundary here because it's got a tighter shortwave over Indiana and Ohio to help further enhance the lift here. Why is the European not doing it? Because that shortwave you see here in the European lags. It's over Missouri. So it has less precip. But what this means is, we just kind of walk through this again. Here we go. We know that we're protected by high pressure through Wednesday. Our first chance at precip is probably coming through on, Thursday during the day and Thursday evening. And then we have the second surge coming through Friday. And then after that, things clear out again. We're going to watch, because that subtropical ridge tries to rebuild, for another system to kind of follow the same trajectory. But if you add it all up, this is the next 7 days of precip. I'll pause it right there. This is now Thursday at noon. So other than what you've got right here, which is mostly coming on Sunday night, okay, because I'm recording this late in the night on Sunday. This is the Sunday night stuff. Very dry throughout much of this week until we get the push coming in on Thursday. There it is. So that's Thursday into Friday. And then we have the second surge that tries to follow it. But overall, this is what we're looking at in terms of total accumulated precipitation through the next 10 days. And if you just look at the European model and say, well, what's the chances of us getting at least an inch over the next 10 days? Well, the highest chances are still below 60% right here, while the wettest conditions are in the kind of the confluence of the Mississippi and the Ohio River Valley right in through this area. That's where the wettest conditions seem to be. When you look out there at week 2, we're starting again to see the influence of that subtropical ridge. So if it sits in place like this, systems, like I told you, run around it, and we tend to see a drier signal. So we have a drier signal in the GFS, and we have a drier signal in the European. It's not dry, just drier. So it's less than our average, while this particular part of the Midwest and Ohio Valley, Mid-South, are going to be wetter than average through this pattern. Now, the temperature side of it, I pulled up the forecasting system I've built. I just pulled it up for Raleigh because one of the stats I put in this, and again, you can find this at agweather.com. You just come right here. I show you the next 7 days average temperature. Raleigh's average temperature for the next 7 days is 50. That's combining the highs and lows for 7 days, and that's 7 degrees warmer than normal. By the way, I was mentioning that rain. This is what I'm talking about. This afternoon here on Sunday, coming through this evening, that's the little bit that's getting added right now to that previous figure that I showed you right here. Now back to this, very mild throughout this week, as you see. Take a look at these temperatures. If we just start off on Monday here, 50s going forward. This is Tuesday, Wednesday, 60s, Thursday, 60s, Friday back down to the upper 50s, lower 60s for the interior. And our first chance at some cooler airs after that front I showed you that comes through Thursday, Friday that delivers our chances for precipitation. But this isn't cold, right? And if you look at the next 15 days as a sliding 5-day window of temperature, of average temperatures, you just notice mild air is in place. A lot of Pacific air, a lack of big troughs or big ridges is keeping the the pattern away from extreme cold. So very important forecast for February. I mean, that's quite mild. Now, how about beyond that? CPC released some new data last Friday. This is their week 3, week 4 outlook. Can you see the influence of the ridge? We favor more warm days than cold days as we work all the way out there to the beginning of March. And this same forecast, both with precipitation and temperatures being echoed by the new long-range European model. I'll take it out a little farther, mid-February to mid-March, that 30-day window. Again, more mild days than colder days, more persistent troughing in the west. But remember, this flow is diving, running up over the ridge. We just see a lot of that. So where all the action is right in the middle, where it just skirts through, and that's where the model has the wettest conditions. Systems come in, dive, eject. So we're drier into Texas. We're drier along the Gulf Coast compared to normal, and the models have really kind of bit into this particular pattern. Now, in the last few minutes of this video, I'm going to show you brand new data released on Sunday, today, when I'm recording this, of our longer range forecast. And this is some pretty important stuff here. This is a current look at ocean temperatures. And all of a sudden, for the last about 3 weeks, we've broke a 3-year La Nina pattern with warmer water emerging here. And what is very important right now is that these had been, the trade winds right across this area, had been very strong for months on end. And take a look at this. Now, I realize it's kind of an ugly, weird diagram, but I showed it to you before. It's today, all the way through the 20th of February. And this seems to be one of the last big gasps of those strong trade winds. Do you notice as you get past about February 15th, we no longer see either the strong red colors, which represent westerly wind bursts, or the blue colors, which represent easterly. This means La Nina is losing its influence. And what I want to tell you is where they're meeting right now for the next several days. See, the blues are meeting the reds. That's sitting right over here over phase 7. And phase 7 historically reinforces a trough in the trough in the west, but a southeastern ridge. It's all fitting together nicely. But what I want to tell you is this. The newest data has shown up again and given us the same picture. This La Nina seems to be more and more consistently forecast to fade, which means we have more and more confidence that it will continue to push out. And right now, the latest forecast would suggest that by late summer, we may be discussing El Nino conditions for the first time in 3 years. So in a nutshell, does that increase our risk of heat this summer? It actually does. It does increase that risk, but it also decreases the risk of multiple landfalling hurricanes. So we have kind of an interesting relationship with El Nino La Nina, not nearly as strongly correlated along the East Coast as it is in the Midwest or the Western United States. But this is it. This is what we're watching. This is the February outlook on ocean temperatures, and as we go forward into March, April, May, June, and July, and now August, we see the models really letting off on the trade winds, the warm water sloshing back. That's what an El Nino is, and we're starting to see that surface here. Now, generally speaking, across the whole of the United States, a transition out of a La Nina toward an El Nino is a favorable thing for the upcoming year. But I'm just going to make one important point here. I do not like how much we have seen this southeast ridge. And if we don't see the pattern in spring remove that southeast ridge or push it out over Bermuda and leave it there, my concern going into summer starts to increase for drought risk for the East Coast. Now, it's just a concern right now. It's something I'm telling you in February so that when we talk about it throughout the rest of spring, either it's showing up or not, you know when we started to have that discussion. But what I would like to do now is zip into the United States. I'm going to flip this over to precipitation, and I'm going to look at seasonal anomalies. So let's come back here. Right now, this is the February, March, and April outlook. Very wet in this area, drier in the west, especially in the western Corn Belt, in the western plains, and through the Intermountain West. This is the outlook for March, April, May. Going into April, May, and June, it would seem that spring is going to give us the tightest windows here. That's just it. That's the mainstay of this forecast. That's been a very consistent thing. I do not see strong anomalies one way or the other for North Carolina at this point. But I'll just let you know it's on our doorstep. A very wet spring is sitting here currently. Now, as we go from April, May, and June into May, June, July, and then June, July, August, let's just go out there. See how the models are keeping things wet? This would be that the models are attempting to break down the southeastern ridge and keep it way offshore. Now, if that happens, we're going to have a great growing season. There will be storms, there will be rain, and the risk of heat goes down. But if that ridge isn't over here and instead is closer, we do have the risk of having heat. But that's every year. We're always talking about that. I'm just giving you the latest model evidence just to have a look at it here. So we'll keep talking about this over the next couple of videos, but this is the latest kind of preliminary outlook we've had now for the rest of spring and getting into summer. On the temperature side of this, I'll be honest with you, the models have a pretty distinct bias. How about we look at March, April, May? I just want to show you what the spring temperatures are looking like right now. It's mild overall. The models kind of have that packed in there for a while. We don't anticipate major late shocking colder outbreaks, into late March and early April. I just don't see a reason for that yet. In order to get one of those to happen, I've got to have a really disrupted and volatile polar vortex, and we don't. So that's just one component of this going forward. But very lastly here, very quickly, I want to talk to you about South America. So very wet in Brazil, most of Brazil. The harvest is huge, a lot of soybeans coming out here. Our problem areas come back to parts of Argentina. So as I play through this entire next week, you'll notice that it's not until next weekend that scattered storms start to come back in Argentina. And during that whole time period, it is expected to be quite mild for the next 10 days here. So they have about 10 days that they're going to be enduring another kind of brief drought episode with some very high heat, temperatures easily getting up above 40 degrees Celsius. That's going to continue to cause some problems. 40 degrees Celsius is 104 Fahrenheit, I think. There'll be some hot places here during this next week. But overall, this is the bigger picture for the next 15 days. Very, very wet in central Brazil. The dryer to the north is going to help with harvest. They're behind in harvest right now. And it's been too green, too late, and that's going to be an issue for planting safrinha corn. But most of the next 15 days are drier, except for some storms coming in after about the 10th of February into parts of Argentina. But there's been a long-standing drought issue here. So I just want to keep you posted on that. Have a good week. I'll talk to you again next Monday. Thanks.